Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the Whitwam Organic Sort of Weekly Garden and Nursery Report. My name is David Whitwam, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. So I've got a really cool slideshow for you guys. I was in one of my gardens this morning that I tend to every week, and I just thought it looked it looked so great, and it was so nice to be there this morning that I really wanted to share it with you guys and hopefully bring some encouragement to you and your gardening, and let you know that yes, you can have a wonderful garden over the summer here in Florida. So we'll kind of go through that slide by slide, and I'll break down what's going on in each picture, and hopefully you can take something away from this. So before I get into that, let's get into the nursery report. So what do we have live in the nursery right now for sale? We have 3 different types of amaranth that grows extremely well here during the summer. We have a callaloo, red amaranth, and white leaf amaranth. Look up callaloo dishes. They're just absolutely phenomenal. However, one of my favorite ways to cook all 3 of these is lightly steamed or boiled, drained, and I just use it like you would cooked spinach in pretty much any dish. African tree basil. We also have 2 types of downy mildew resistant sweet basils. We have a Genovese type, and we also have a sweet basil type that grows a little bit taller with pointy leaves. African blue basil, I can't say enough about that plant. There's actually going to be one featured in our slideshow, and it's huge. Great plant for gardening. Hey, whoever's watching right now, if y'all can post in the comments and say hello. I just want to make sure that my comment stream is working, because I'm doing some funky stuff today with a monitor and a slideshow, and I've on the back end I have things set up a little bit differently, so I'm just making sure everything's working. We also have some lemon basil, Ford hook chard. I've had chard go all summer. I've grown it straight through. So definitely one that can be grown over the summer. Hey, everybody. Hey, John. Hey, Michael. Hey, Christine. Hey, Corey. Glad you guys are in here. We also have collard greens for sale. We have a few different types of Coreopsis, Cosmos, Gloriosa daisies, dotted horsemint, Black Beauty eggplant, Chinese bride eggplant, the Gaillardia Indian blanket flower, formerly known as Florida native. I'm still pushing back on that one. Jicama. Man, if you haven't grown jicama, that is one of the easiest plants I've ever grown. It's not too late. It does really likes the longer days of summer for root development. I've grown it all year here in Tampa. The roots are just a little bit smaller. This past winter, I did a little bit of an experiment. So in the fall, when we dug up the jicama, I harvested all the jicama. I took a few of the small tubers and I put them back in the ground to see if they would resprout. And they've resprouted and they're growing really well. But you can start it from seed. So in that aspect, it can kind of be treated as a perennial. You dig up all of your roots, take some of the smaller tubers, plant them back down. They'll pop back up in the spring, grow all summer. And apparently you're supposed to get way more tubers and way bigger tubers if you're growing it off from a tuber as opposed to growing it from seed. But got to start somewhere. So get those seeds. This is a big shocker for people. We're still growing lettuce. So we have Manoa lettuce out in the nursery. We also have Jericho romaine that's up and coming right now. We keep it under dappled light. We do have the plants for sale, but I would recommend to you buying the seeds. The reason being is because obviously with seeds, you get more bang for your buck. Now, the Manoa seeds germinate outside, no problem, all summer. The Jericho romaine, I think it's just a little too hot. So we actually will germinate that indoors in plug trays and then plant that out into the gardens. But the idea is you're not letting these grow to be full heads. So you're harvesting them as kind of baby lettuce, so smaller plants. So if you just bought one 4-pack from us, you're not going to get much bang for your buck. So yeah, still growing the less. Oh, and it doesn't get bitter. Even when it bolts, it does not get bitter. We also have the Hakachu, the Hakachu, God bless you, cantaloupes, and the Ginkaku Korean melons. Those are going to be featured in my photo slideshow. We have a few types of Florida native milkweeds. We have the incarnata and the tuberosa, the butterfly weed and the swamp milkweed. We also have world milkweed. We have mojito mint, peppermint, Vietnamese mint, and of course okra. We have burgundy okra, Clemson spineless okra, jambalaya okra. We also have big red peppers, which are sweet peppers, California wonder peppers, which are also sweet peppers. A lot of people don't know this, but green, like all peppers are green peppers. So when you go to the grocery store and you buy green peppers, you really don't know what color peppers you bought. So you could just call them early peppers. So to get full-size green peppers might take you about 60, 70, 75 days. And then it about doubles that to get the colored peppers. So what they'll do is they go out into the field and they harvest maybe a third, half the peppers off the plants. And then they leave the remainder peppers on the plants. That helps what's left get bigger and give them another couple months for them to turn color. This is why the red peppers, yellow peppers, orange peppers are more expensive at the store. So they've been taking up more real estate for longer periods of time. So they're going to be more expensive. So green peppers are just early peppers. So if you've got any colored peppers, so basically our big red peppers and our California wonder peppers, both are red peppers. We also have orange habaneros. We have jalapenos, Thai bird pepper plants, and then roselle. Guys, it's getting late to get your roselle in by seed. So we'll have plants for sale all the way up through probably September, maybe August. And then I put whatever's left in my stock out into gardens because you really should have gotten it in sooner than that. Most of these roselles, I know there's a bunch of weird reports coming out of people's roselles putting their calyxes on early or twice a year or whatnot. But for the most part, the plants are daylight sensitive. And so you want to get them in the ground now so that you will have a bigger plant for a bigger harvest once September, October, November rolls around and they really start putting out their flowers. We have tropical salvia, Molokai or Egyptian spinach. That one is just incredible. We got some really neat information on the website about that one. Ahubak Korean squash. We grow that one all summer. It's like a nice zucchini. Of course, calabazas. Tatum, not really sure. Tatume. That's a fun one. I actually grow that one almost year round, so we do have it on our summer list. It's a Mexican squash that can actually be harvested and eaten at all stages. So you can eat it like a, what are they called? The round zucchini, or you can let it fully mature and eat it like a calabaza. And they taste great at all stages. So if you want to pick them on a little on the bigger green side, they're going to taste a little bit more like an acorn squash. As they fully mature and start turning color, they do get that sweetness, a lot like a calabaza, or you can harvest them young a few days or a week after fruit set as a zucchini. So I think the plants are, the line, genetic line is hundreds, if not 1,000 years old. So they've been growing this one for quite some time. And then the Tiabat put avocado squash, huge vining squash. That one tastes okay if you let them go too far. Not really that great. They're pretty watery. Those are definitely meant to be harvested young, like a zucchini, and you harvest them somewhere between the size of a Hass avocado and one of those Florida avocados. We also have Tampa verbena, which is a Florida native that is actually endangered out in the wild. And then Texas tarragon. So lots of fun stuff to choose from. And then, of course, if there's anything on our heat loving greens and things list that I didn't mention. These were just the plants that we have in the nursery live right now. Those can all be started by seed. We'll get over we'll go over the timing just a little bit on some of that stuff, because on a few of the things we're gonna wait just a little bit on planting them. So that being said, so I guess garden report. What have I been doing out in the gardens lately? I've been ripping out a lot of stuff. So for the most part, almost everything we've had in the gardens that was from winter crops are dead. You'll also see some of that in the slideshow. Spring crops, a lot of the real spring crops that we put in, not summer crops that we put in the spring, but actual real spring crops are toast at this point. And so we're kind of turning the beds over and getting some more summer stuff in the gardens. You have a couple choices right now. If that's kind of the situation that you're in, you can put a cover crop in right now. You can plant summer stuff. So summer stuff really can be planted all the way back from when it finally warms up enough in March or April, all the way through and grown into fall, because it stays hot here usually through September, October, maybe into November. So, it's definitely not too late to get your summer stuff in. You could cover your beds. You can solarize your beds. You could, I don't recommend this, but you could just leave them, pull up all the weeds and wait to put in your fall stuff, which we really don't plant that stuff out into the gardens if it's officially on the spring and fall list. We usually don't plant that stuff out into the gardens until the weather gets nice again. So that might be last week of September. Now, nice, I'm not talking about like a big cool down. What I'm literally talking about is when you walk out, like our daily rainstorms kind of start dissipating, and when you go outside first thing in the morning, you don't want to die. So you might want to have your mosquito population, is not as bad as it is right now. The weather's basically what's happening is the weather, morning temperatures are nighttime lows. We're getting down into the upper 60s, maybe lower 70s consistently. Humidity's dropped out of the air. That can happen anytime from the last week of September through October. I've seen it as late as the first week of November. So somewhere in between the last week of September, first week of November, we're putting our fall stuff into the ground as seeds if it's a short season, or plants if it's a long season. So long season fall crops, we start the seeds of as early as the end of July to mid-August. So that would be your regular tomatoes, some types of peppers, eggplants, anything that takes, I'd say, over 70 days, maybe 80 days, I consider to be a long season fall crop or spring crop. And then your short season stuff goes in the ground by seed the same time you're putting the plants in that you started way back at the end of July or August. So you start the long season stuff way back here, and then when the weather turns nice, you throw the plants in the garden and you put your seeds in of your short season stuff. So that would be 60-day crops, 45-day crops, 65-day crops. So that would be your zucchini, yellow squash, beans, stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that today, kind of timing and what to plant and when to plant it. So, hey, Sissy, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. So just kind of talking about some of the stuff we are doing in our gardens right now. Corey, so I've said this and I was saying it, the date when your tomatoes hit the brick wall is usually sometime between Mother's Day and Father's Day. So any tomatoes that you're eating out of your garden, unless there's exceptions, like extremely heat tolerant, like Everglades tomatoes and stuff like that. But I'm talking about tomatoes that you would normally reserve only for that pleasant weather that we get in the fall, over the winter, if it's not too cold, and into the spring. Any of those types of tomatoes that you're eating out of your garden on July 4th is a miracle. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying there aren't people who have exceptions or get lucky or whatnot, but for the most part, it's damn impossible to eat the temperate tomatoes out of your garden by July 4th. So usually what's happening is they've stopped producing viable fruit. You might have some that are still on the plant. You might avoid the leaf-footed bugs or stink bugs from damaging the fruit. The plant's probably not putting out any more viable pollen at this time of year, and you're just waiting for those last ones to possibly mature enough to where you can pick them off the plant and let them finish ripening indoors, while the whole time watching your plants just tank, hoping that they're, staying viable enough to bring that last fruit to fruition. If you're me and you already kind of know the timing of these things and you got a good tomato harvest, I pull them out early. What I found is that while that's happening to your tomatoes, they also become a breeding ground for nematodes. So kind of as those plants are tanking, the nematode populations in the roots are going through the roof. So part of my nematode control methods are pulling plants out prior to that sharp downhill nosedive. And Corey, yes, it is super dramatic, like a switch. It sitting down trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, to me, is no different if we were up north and the tomatoes tank like a switch, trying to sit down and figure out exactly what went wrong, well, the cold air and the water formed ice and it chemically or physically caused the cells of the plant to explode, and well, maybe we can add minerals to the plants to help the cell walls expand better. I mean, to me, that's as silly as when this time of year people are trying to pick apart exactly what went wrong with their tomatoes. It's a myriad of things, and there's just so many things coming at them. It's not even worth trying to figure out. So, yes, snow, ice, if we're up north and it was November, literally sitting down, pulling our hair out, trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. Oh, was it the days are getting too short? Was it the nighttime was too cold, or was the daytime not hot enough? It's just silly. The season's over, and there's definitely, if we were up north, what screams the end of season for plants is so much more obvious, and there's less factors. I understand how this trips people up, the end of tomato season, because well, okay, I got leaf-footed bugs on my tomato plants. Well, maybe I can use a pesticide and treat for that. Well, okay, maybe it was a bacterial wilt or a blight. Well, maybe I can use the fungicides and treat for that. Well, maybe it was too hot and too much sun. Well, maybe I could put shade cloth up for that. And I know people who will continue to do okay with their tomatoes deep into summer, doing all of these things. But at some point in my brain, you just went into the category of somebody who lives up north who built a hothouse for their tomatoes and put heaters in it. And they go out there every day and wipe the snow off of them so the sun can get in there. And could you imagine if we were up north and somebody was doing that, how crazy they would look if they were trying to use that as an argument that the season wasn't over? Right? I mean, you'd look at them and be like, no, bro, you're going against the season's over. You're just doing crazy backflips and working against the season, which is fine. But if you're pulling your tomatoes into a lanai and you have 8 shade cloths up and you're spraying pesticides all of the time, and that's the argument you're going to make to me that the season's not over, you're the guy up north with a hothouse in January, and no, the season's over. It's done. So there it is. Silly people. But that was my last video, was on the tomatoes and the 4 horsemen of the tomato apocalypse. And I actually, I think a lot of people's tomatoes went a little bit longer this year because I don't know if y'all could tell, even though it's been like brutally hot, our daily rains took a few minutes to kick in, but the humidity really hasn't been there in the morning. And there's been some evenings. So the humidity has been down a little bit lower than what I'm used to seeing this time of year, but I'm sure July is just sitting there waiting, going, hold my beer and watch this. So this becomes easier and easier to do, to move, to tear out crops from the previous season when you have other crops that you're looking forward to. And so some of these crops that I've mentioned from our heat-loving greens and things list, they really enjoy the heat and the humidity and the longer days and the more intense angle of the sun's rays. And I mean, if you can get yourself into a point where you're really, really enjoying 3 or 4 or 5 of these things off this list that just aren't happy once October and November hits. Even if it's hot, it just, the sun might not be high enough in the sky. So you've gone November, December, January, February, March. Maybe you tried to plant it in March and it was still too cold. April, you finally get it going in April, or maybe you have so much winter stuff in and spring stuff in, you just don't even have room for it. So it finally gets to a point where, like, when you know the end is coming for these crops, you start looking forward to it because you need the real estate. You need the space to get this summer going. So that's why I'm trying to show you guys this heat-loving greens and things list, because it's not just that some of this stuff tolerates the summer, it needs the summer. And so if you get into some of these crops and you really, really enjoy them, it's nothing to be pulling these tomatoes out at the first sign of trouble in May, and because you need room for your Malabar spinach or what have you. I've mentioned this before, and then I'll get into the slideshow. If you're kind of new to this and trying to figure out the seasons and what to plant when and where, I have a really simple formula. So winter stuff. My winter stuff in my head, I have in 2 categories, okay? The summer stuff I have in 2 categories. And the spring fall stuff I have in 2 categories in my head. I already mentioned the spring fall 2 categories. So that's not the 2 categories aren't spring or fall. I'm talking about spring fall stuff is the same stuff. It likes it. They're Goldilocks plants. It likes it when it's pleasant outside. They don't like it too hot. They don't like it too cold. So your spring fall stuff, 2 categories. And I'm sorry for all of you who watch all these videos because I keep repeating this. The 2 categories are short season and long season. I talked about why that's important, because that tells you, the long season stuff you need to start in July or August, and then again in January, no later than February. Your short season stuff, you can actually wait until the weather gets right for it and put the seeds in. Okay, and that way your stuff is all kind of growing at the same rate and beginning to produce right when the weather gets really nice. Because what's right around the corner? Too cold. And then in the spring, what's right around the corner? Too hot. So you got to be on the ball on getting that stuff going. Your summer list, the 2 categories are loves the summer and extremely tolerant of the summer. So the stuff that loves the summer, like okra, you can plant every day till like mid or end of summer. The stuff that is extremely tolerant of the summer, I usually will stop planting that around May or June, and kind of let those crops go. And then I usually will wait again until like mid-July to plant them again. The stuff that's extremely tolerant of the summer sometimes just doesn't do so well on getting it started during this like 3-week, 4-week period around the summer solstice. So if my chin is the summer solstice, you got 2 weeks before, or 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after, that the sun is just way too intense. So you got about 4 weeks with the solstice right in the middle, maybe 6 weeks, depending on how much sun your location gets, that I don't plant the stuff that tolerates the summer. And we're kind of in that right now. And we'll talk about that during the slideshow. So the summer stuff, 2 categories are extremely tolerant of the summer and loves the summer. Okay. The winter list is basically everything that's on the winter list is stuff that can take a frost or a freeze. And the winter's 2 categories are heat tolerant and needs it cold. Okay. So heat tolerant would be kale, collards, cabbage, right? Not summer heat tolerant, winter heat tolerant. And then the stuff that needs it cold. Like you need to, when you're driving around, you need to see women with scarves and boots on, right? So that would be like some of your lettuces, spinach, right? That's stuff. Bok choy might bolt if it's too hot. So that's stuff that really needs it cold. Okay. So back to what I was saying. In planting your gardens, if you had, let's say you had 2 beds, okay? In one bed, you're going to only plant your winter stuff and your summer stuff. And in your other bed, you're going to only plant your spring stuff and your fall stuff. Okay? So because your spring stuff and your fall stuff comes off of the same list, and a lot of that stuff is in the same, might be in the same genus. Now this is the only bed you really need to worry about conscious crop rotation. Whereas the winter bed, with the winter bed that you're planting only winter stuff and summer stuff, that bed you don't have to worry as much about crop rotation because they're just so vastly different. So like lettuce is just not related to okra at all. Okay. So remember, each category has 2 categories in it. So in your winter summer bed, right? When the stuff that needs it cold starts dying off because it's too warm, that's when you would plant the stuff that is extremely tolerant of summer. And then your stuff that loves, or that is your heat tolerant winter stuff, as that stuff starts dying off, that's when you would put in the stuff that loves the summer. Okay. And then the stuff that loves the summer is going to die sooner in the fall. And that's again where you're going to put in your heat tolerant winter stuff. And the stuff that tolerates the summer is going to go further into the fall because it also tolerates the cold better. And that's when you're going to put in the stuff that needs it cold for the wintertime. And then your spring fall bed, you plant, like you just follow the timing that I talked about before. That's also usually the stuff that needs solarization or, like I said, crop rotation, or could use a cover crop or marigolds or something to that effect. So sometimes in the spring fall bed, you'll have bigger gaps of not planting anything. And that's a good thing. So you can let the soil rest. That stuff tends to also be more taxing on the soil. But basically, like in my beds that were planting spring stuff and fall stuff, those beds are empty right now. And they're going to stay empty until I put the fall stuff in. I might put a cover crop in, or I might cover them up with landscape cloth, but I'm not putting in summer stuff. in the beds when the spring stuff dies. And the reason being is because if I do that, that summer stuff will still be growing when it's time to plant the fall stuff and still be doing really well. So it's a lot easier to keep track of everything is if you kind of have areas that you plant your spring fall stuff and then have another area that you plant your winter stuff and your summer stuff. So that's kind of my tip on the garden and how we're planting stuff. So that about concludes the nursery and garden report. Now let's move on to the slideshow. So a little bit background. I built this garden in November of 2019. Yeah. Started in November of 2019. I finished it January 2020. And we had great plans of how this community garden was going to connect with the neighborhood. And there's a K-8 school right around the corner. There's a preschool right across the street. And then COVID hit. So basically for over a year, myself and just a few volunteers have been taking care of this garden. And every Wednesday, and we run the food over to the K-8 school for the kids to use. So unfortunately, we haven't had, other than a few neighborhood kids on the weekends when we're working, we haven't had any kids in this garden yet. And I'm really looking forward to getting this up and going when school starts. So I'm super excited about that. A little bit of background. This garden is in Sulphur Springs. Over the past 10 years, this actual space has seen many iterations of a garden. And it would just kind of get going with something and then plop and then turn into a big weeded mess that was a blight on the neighborhood. And then it would get some more traction and more energy. Just year after year after year, basically the garden space itself spent more time as a big, huge pile of weeds in the neighborhood than it did as an actual working garden. So when I was designing this space, the potential for that all went into this design. So I designed this to be more of like a park with a lot of perennials, Florida native plants, Florida friendly plants, perennial plants. And I kind of set these spaces up that look like beds, maybe when you're walking around Busch Gardens or Lowry Park Zoo, those beds, that kind of make the pathways that you walk through. That was kind of my inspiration for this space. And then you'll see there's 8 beds that we do the annuals in. And the idea is if my contract ran out, they ran out of funding or whatnot, and this garden space had to, kind of go back to super bare bones, that we could cover these 8 beds up and they could bring in a real basic landscaping crew and at least keep it nice and clean, as opposed to the way it was kind of coming together like a traditional community garden, which are beautiful and they're great. But, if you don't have those community members there supporting the garden, they can fall apart and turn into a mess really quick. So, okay, just bear with me while I get everything set up here for the slideshow. So this is more tricky than it looks. All right, so I need to get a monitor going. In our studio. Stop. Inner studio. Remove. Okay. All right, cool. So now I can see you guys. When I do the slideshow, I can no longer see y'all's comments. So I have my phone set up as a guest so that I can actually monitor it from my phone so I can answer y'all's questions if y'all are asking while I'm doing the slideshow. All right, now I got to remember where I put it. Okay. Slideshow. Stop. Go back. No, stop. And to stream. There it is, right? Yay. Okay, cool. So these bananas, you're going to see them in lots of pictures just because I'm very happy with them. Don't know what kind they are. Maybe somebody can pipe in and tell me what they think, what kind of bananas they are. You'll see a couple shots where y'all might be able to tell. But this is just kind of looking down one of the pathways. You can see the annual beds over to the right. Oh, there's a circle in the middle. You can see it in the lower right. When I took over the property, they had at the front of the property, they had about 12. They were about 4x4 in-ground beds that were built for the very, very young kids that are across the street at the preschool. And I thought that was such a good idea that they can actually come over and garden full on without really, messing anything up. If we have adults from the community or older kids from the school down the street working in the 8 bigger beds, we don't want the preschool kids to come over and only get a dog and pony show. We also don't want them coming in and messing up other people's hard work. And however, I understand what it's like to be a teacher. I work with a lot of school gardens, especially preschool. They run out of time. They think they can do it and they can't. So when I took over the property, there was actually about 12 of these knockoff earth boxes back behind the shed. And so we built this circular pad in the middle of the property so that if the teachers feel that they have time and can be engaged with gardening, we're going to set the earth boxes up on this middle pad in the middle of the garden and let them have their own garden and have at it. And then if they happen to lose interest or, fall off the planet, which happens, we can dump them out, stack them back up behind the garden. And there isn't some, a bunch of beds that they've kind of inherited that we're not really too sure. Are they going to come over? They're going to take care of them, and just becoming more of a mess and more of an eyesore. So that's what that center pad right now. I just have a picnic table on it. But anyway, so these bananas were about 2.5 feet tall. There's 3 of them that I planted in probably January, maybe December of, it was either December of 2019 or January of 2020. I put these bananas in. So there's 3 stands here. And it was 3 small plants in a little bitty pot. And they have just exploded. They love this spot. It might help that I have the property's 3 compost bins right at the base of the bananas, and every single little stick and scrap from the garden goes into these compost bins. So that's probably could be maybe one of the reasons. But anyway, those are the bananas. So this is just one of the perennial beds. There's a few Barbados cherries in there, some cassia. There's also some flax lilies. There's not everything I have in the garden is a Florida native, but my criteria for planting in the garden was it either needed to be edible, it needed to be a Florida native, or it had to be a Florida-friendly landscaping plant that can be easily propagated from what we have. So all of the non-native plants that are not edible are on the Florida-friendly list, meaning they're not invasive, they're super easy to take care of, they're common in landscaping, and they can be budded off of or split the rhizomes or whatnot. And the idea was that people from the neighborhood will be able to come in and we can split off landscaping plants and give them to take home to landscape their own yard. Oops. So one of the stands actually has four. I swear to you, last week this was just a flower. And the week before that, the flower was just emerging. So this is in 2 weeks, the sucker's already got bananas on it. And this one stand that started as one tree, so like I said, there's 3 stands here, has 4 flowers on it. I'm just super impressed by what's going on with this banana. And there's another flower. Another flower. These are all from 4 separate, whatever you call them, the tree, but it's the same plant. So coming from the same mother plant. And 4. So here you can really see that circle. I left a big open space for us. That tarp on the left is when we get soil deliveries. And you can see the annual beds over to the right. The bananas, there's mangoes, Jamaican cherries, Barbados cherries, peaches, star fruit, the bananas. So the idea was to be able to have fruit that is actually being produced on the property for the kids that come in the garden. It to be a walkable, enjoyable park, and then to also have some fruits that are semi-ever-bearing that kids will be able to kind of pick at throughout the yard, which the Jamaican cherries and the Barbados cherries are kind of filling that slot. There's a huge peach tree here that I don't know what type it is. It really hasn't produced that well. And then right next to it on the right is a big old starfruit tree. Those were both there when I took over and built this. So we kept the fruit trees that were there, that were mature and doing really well, and pretty much everything else came out. Other than the 2 sheds and these 2 trees, we completely cleared this property. So again, this was all planted November 2019 through January 2020. Just another view. So right now I'm standing pretty much right at the front gate. I planted another starfruit, a starfruit tree right there. You can see that big old starfruit. There was actually 2 more starfruit planted in between these, but on our big volunteer day, they weren't so friendly with them on planting. And so of the 3 starfruit that I planted in here, we only had 1 survive, unfortunately. These are the 2 Jamaican cherries. I kind of put them side by side, and I'm training them to kind of make a nice little arch over the front person entrance. And there you can see there's literally the preschool is directly across the street. This front bed right here, and we got a nice little gate I can drive my truck in right there on the right. That's actually the name of the garden. It's funded through the YMCA, the Sulphur Springs Teaching Garden. And this perennial bed right here that's got 2 Barbados cherries, a Jamaican cherry, some cassia, scarlet sage, the blueberry flax lily. This kind of area right here is where the preschool had their beds. It's really shaded right there. So this really wasn't the best spot. Actually, where that big circle of the pavers is in the middle just gets blasted with sun. Terrible spot as a seating area, great spot once they kick up and start using those earth boxes. So this is just another view from the far end of the garden. The annual beds are on the left. You can see the corner of the wood right there. We also have a couple mangoes are there, the papaya. There is I think it's called African walking iris. It gets those really pretty purple flowers on it. And then there is agapanthus. Those all split up really, really well as far as like budding off and throwing them in a pot and letting people take them home. There's also the native plumbago right there on the right, kind of climbing up the fence. Still lots of the scarlet sage is kind of filling in the gaps. So I think there's 2 mangoes right there. Like when these mangoes, the other peaches, star fruit, all get fully mature like these bananas, this space is going to be absolutely rocking, and such a lovely park to come hang out in and, you know, walk around and look at stuff. And the cool thing about this is even if I'm not growing anything in the annual beds, there's still plenty to see and learn about when working with the kids. So like I said, if for some reason funding runs out and they can't, you know, have my contract where I'm there working those garden beds, or we're lacking in volunteers, or whatever the situation might be, that this is still a usable, workable food park, you know, Florida native park, learning about Florida friendly landscaping park for the community to be able to enjoy. So there's 2 mangoes back there, a papaya, a Barbados cherry, and then lots of the scarlet sage up front. There's also some dotted horse mint in that bed. And that bed in between the 2 mangoes is actually where we put our strawberry plants that I dug out of the annual beds the other day, just to give them a home to kind of chill out and hopefully put off their runners over the summertime. And then we'll take the runners from the plants and put them back out into the annual beds once the weather's right for strawberries in the fall. See, I have a theory that here in Tampa, we can get going with strawberries probably about 4 to 6 weeks earlier than when the bare roots become commercially available. So in a lot of my community garden projects, rather than tearing out the plants and getting rid of them, I've actually had all the volunteers replant them in a shady spot, and we're going to over summer them, like overwintering. We're going to over summer them, and then they put out runners, and we're going to pick the runners off, and that's what we're going to plant out in our gardens in the fall. I think I have better shots of these 2 beds up front. I had mentioned in the video description that I was kind of pushing the envelope on some stuff. So this is actually 2 rounds of collards that are down in the bottom right. There's collards growing that we had in all winter. Those are the little bit taller ones. And then on the outside rows of the taller ones is 2 more rows of collards that I put in probably 5 weeks ago. And these are the ones that every week I show up, I'm telling them, you know, if they get any big problems, that they're coming out, and they're I think I have the fear of God in them because they're listening and they're producing, and we don't have any problems. In a couple of my other gardens that we tried this in, we had caterpillars really bad, and then the harlequin bug showed up. And usually if the harlequin bug shows up, I call it quits on any collards that I'm trying to grow into summer or over summer. So this bed right here has got Thai peppers in it. It has some Ginkaku melons and the Hakachu cantaloupe. That was planted just a few weeks ago, the Ginkaku melon and the Hakachu melon. There's also habanero peppers back there, jalapeno peppers, and they're all doing great. They couldn't be happier. Well, I take that back. There's a couple Thai peppers on the end that are starting to yellow a little bit. They don't like all this rain. They do definitely seem to enjoy drying out a little bit more, but they're still producing and they're doing great. And the Hakachu melon and the Ginkaku melons are beginning to run and get female flowers on them. And then you'll see here in another picture the Hakachu and Ginkaku melons that I put in about 6 weeks prior to putting these in. And you can see how many melons they have on them. All these pictures were taken this morning here in Tampa. So here you can see our little icebox watermelon over there on the right. And these are the Hakachu cantaloupes and the Ginkaku melon. I don't think you can see any of them in this picture. It's a striped melon. They haven't even started getting their color on them yet. These are all the Hakachu cantaloupes. So again, these went in as plants probably about 12 weeks ago, maybe 10 weeks ago. Now, you'll notice how many leaves these plants are missing. Part of my summer strategy with these is I go in and remove about 40 to 50% of the leaves off these plants every week I go. They don't need all these leaves. They're growing crisscross all over each other. Just be really careful. Make sure you don't, cut through the vines. But it really opens them up. It helps the bees find the flowers. If you have to spray BT or something for caterpillars, which I am doing weekly right now, it's a lot less vegetation to have to spray. And it really helps to open it up and get airflow in there, which helps with diseases. So far, I haven't had to use anything for powdery mildew or downy mildew. It's definitely there, though. But manual removal is the key. So these melons will probably be ready in about another 2 to 3 weeks. That icebox watermelon right there might even be ready next week. But super fast. It's one of my favorite things about them. They're actually 70 days from 70 to 85 days from seed. They all take about 30, 35 days after fruit set. So really that discrepancy in how long they take to ripen, it all just depends on how fast your plants set fruit. See, Corey says, I've had luck with collards all summer, except about 4 to 6 weeks where they look like trash. Then they recover in the fall. The year before, I harvested more often, and they did all right through the summer. I'd remove the worst leaves and eat the next worst. Yeah, I've had really good luck with collards too. Like I said, unless the harlequin bugs show up and they just do a real number on them, and that's usually when I call it quits. And I'll have gardens that I'll be working in that are 2 miles away from each other, and they'll be in one garden and not in another one. So it's not like the leaf-footed bugs where like I see leaf-footed bugs in one place in Tampa, and then over the course of the next week, I start just seeing them everywhere. So I don't think there's any Ginkaku melons in these shots, but I know they were in these beds. So this is it's a Ginkaku melon, the Hakachu melon, and the icebox watermelon are all kind of mishmashed together. They're really not cooperating with me and climbing up the strings that I provided them. They seem to want to run all over the ground right now. So rather than taking the vines, big vines, and trying to put them up on the string, just kind of letting them do their thing and keeping the leaves thinned out. What I found with I actually did it to this. If you look on the right-hand side of this picture, I took that vine and draped it up over the string just so you could see how now this vine's leaves are all pointed in the wrong direction. They're all upside down. And so those leaves are all probably going to have to get cut off next week because they're all going to get powdery mildew and not be doing so well. So on a lot of these vining plants, the less you actually have to move massive amounts of vines, the better it is for the plant. So you want to get stuff trellised up sooner than later, for sure. Just another shot of the plant sprawling all over the place. This is our huge African blue basil plant. It's literally taking up half of a 4-foot by 16-foot garden bed. It's one of my favorite spots in the garden to hang out every week, and just watching the massive amount of different pollinators, bees, wasps. There's stuff flying around in this plant that I've never seen before. I try and get pictures of it to post and ask, and everything's just like all my pictures turn out really blurry. They don't hold still for a second like butterflies do. They're all just zipping and beep bopping around. But a lot of cool stuff. This is, like I said, definitely, I'll tell you what, this plant will get weeds coming in through those bare spots. And I'll get somebody over their fear of bees really fast when I send them over here to thin this plant out. Or at the very least, when they see me doing it, elbows deep in this plant, pulling out stuff, and I'm not getting stung, hopefully that's a testament to them about how when these pollinators are doing their job and are distracted, that they just don't even give two craps that you're there. Corey's asking me, notice what causes the African basil to be more purple or more green. So yes, I believe it's temperature. So apparently people up north of here. So basically, we have sold so much African blue basil, it is absolutely ridiculous. So it started about in March, and it kind of peaked mid-May, and we couldn't keep up. We were planting 100, 200 plants at a time, and when they finally got to the point where they had roots and we could upplant them into their containers, we'd be sold out in a week. So I'm probably going into the African blue basil business. But my point is, Corey, I had a lot of customers take pictures of their plants when they arrived and ask me the same thing, like, why aren't yours purple? And they were all green. There was no purple on the stems. There was no veining, nothing. And the flowers are still kind of purple. And my theory and what I told everybody was it's cold. And like, I guess where they're used to growing it and seeing it are all grown in greenhouses where it stays warm. And since we have such mild winters, we're able to overwinter them outside where they're exposed to extremely cold weather. I mean, these plants get basically exposed to weather. If that plant's still alive and you're growing it in Florida, I guarantee you it was exposed to temperatures that were just above what kills that plant. Because I know when we've had nights that got down to like 31, my blue basil that was outside was toast. So I know whatever temperatures we were getting are literally right on the edge of what these plants can handle, because I keep all my mother plants outside. And that forces them to be all green. As we moved into May, June, all the new growth coming out of the plants now has got way more purple on it, way more veining, purple on the stems. It's not like that deep purple that's in the pictures that you see online. I'm sure there's probably different eco types out there. I've never seen it where the leaves are majority purple. I've always only seen it with some veining and purple stems on the new growth. And that's what we're getting right now. So my theory is pretty solid that it's the temperature. And it's probably temperature and cultivar strain. And I think, Corey, at one point you and I were talking about possibly, could it be some sort of degradation in the cloning process? I don't know. I haven't had any that like used to be purple and now it's not. I think I remember a long time ago you saying that you have plants that went through that. And it almost makes me wonder too if it might be like a different part of the plant that was cloned off of. So I'm not really too sure. But I have seen it, and I have seen the purple come back, and it's after it finally warms up. Huge patch of sage, some lovely parsley back there that has gone to seed, waiting to collect the seeds off of it. Our Vietnamese mint right there on the right-hand side, and some chives growing strong. This is the Soyo Nishiki cucumber. You can see its first female flower sitting right there in the middle of the picture. I can't really like show you guys what I'm talking about. If you look right there in the middle of the picture, smack in the middle, there's a female flower right there for our first cucumber. And I actually ate my first summer dance cucumber off the summer dance plants this morning. And this is the summer dance plant. If you look on the very bottom of the plant, right there next to the black pipe, you can see a little cucumber right there. And then just above the middle of the picture, where that yellow flower is, right behind it, there's another cucumber. This is the summer dance cucumber. Again, folks, I'll say it again. These pictures were taken here in Tampa this morning. And one of my summer beds. So this was planted just a few weeks ago. This is two different kinds of okra. And then up the middle, are the long beans. So we're going to, this bed will probably be producing until November. I didn't really go too overboard on this on the okra, since I am only at this garden for once a week for an hour to 2 hours. And last year, going into summer, especially with no volunteers or community members coming in, I planted 2 beds full of okra, and it was just way too much. Basically, every week I'd show up, and half the okra was trash. I mean, really, okra needs to be harvested 2 times a week at the minimum, preferably about 3 times a week, or else it just gets too big too fast. This is one of the beds. I just put this in a few weeks ago on the outside of the beds. The healthy looking plants, that's our Paracicaba broccoli from Brazil. They'll be putting out their broccoli shoots shortly. And then up the middle of this bed was some kale that was holding on last week. I ripped these out after I took the pictures, but I really just wanted to show you guys when I'm calling it quits on something like kale. About half these plants are just totally mush. The other ones that are still hanging on are so light green and covered in aphids. It's just not even worth it. So I'm going to put something in the middle of that bed that's going to enjoy it a little bit more. Enjoy this weather instead of fighting it. And that's Paracicaba broccoli from Brazil. I'll definitely post pictures for you guys when this broccoli starts producing in the smack middle of summer. You guys will be impressed. And the collard greens. So you can see the middle row, that's stuff that was in from the wintertime, and then the outer rows there were just planted just a few weeks ago as little bitty starts, and everything looks great. We've been getting big harvests of the collard greens pretty much every week when we were going, and the kids at the school are loving it. I think that's it. We've come back to the first picture. So let me get out of this. There we go. Cool. So what'd you guys think? So Michelle Park Summer Dance sound like fun. They really are. They do really good. When I first discovered these Soya Nishiki cucumbers and the Summer Dance cucumbers, I was super excited because I was like, yay. It's like I was growing, Market Moors and a couple other different kinds and Armenian cucumbers, that would all do really well for fall. Maybe kind of peter out in the winter, maybe, or they might make it through the winter if it was a mild winter and then do really well again in the spring. So when I discovered these, and the first time I planted them was over the summertime, and I was like super excited because I was like, cool, I got cucumbers that I can grow year round in Tampa, minus it getting too cold, freezing. And turns out they love the summer. They need the summer. They do not do well in November at all. It's too cold for them. But if you actually look at the, let me get this right. Now I can jump out of this. I just want to make sure I give you guys the right information. The seeds have a super high germination temperature, which, by the way, when you're trying to figure out if something will do well here over the summer, I kind of go down a list. I look at like regionally where it's from. How far away is that from the equator? Is that similar to the distance that Tampa is? What side of the continent is it on? What kind of weather do they get throughout the year? And germination temperature of the seeds. So those are kind of some of the factors that I look at when I'm trying to figure out, when I was trying to figure out which plants I was going to experiment with for my summer list. So let's see here. Cucumber. I'm just looking this up on my website. I think I only need to look at one because they're the same. So the germination temperature for the summer dance cucumber is 78 to 86 degrees. They will not germinate if the soil temperature is below 78 degrees. Like, I keep the office where I keep our seeds, we keep it like 70 degrees in there. And like we also have some grow lights in there that we will germinate stuff that it's too hot outside, like the Jericho romaine. We germinate that in the office right now. These would not germinate in there. So just a regular 70, 72, 74 degrees, that's too cold. And they won't even germinate. So 78 to 86 degrees is the germination temperature for the soil for the summer dance. And then I'm pretty sure the Soya Nishikis is the same, but let me just verify that. Yeah, 78 to 86 degrees. And you'll notice that for a lot of the stuff on my Heat Loving Greens and Things list, super high germination temperatures. So a lot of this stuff you can germinate into summer. There's a couple things on the list. Like I said, the Jericho romaine, the new Kuroda carrots, I believe that they germinate from 60 to 78 degrees. But if you can get them to germinate right now, they will grow and do really well with the heat. So about another 2 to 3 weeks, I will start germinating some seeds inside. We do not sell them as plants. I do not sell any root crops as plants. Talking about for these community garden projects that I have, we'll be planting some carrots in this garden, and I'll take pictures, but I have to germinate the seeds in little plug trays. And if you do that, you got to get them in the ground real quick. So basically, all I'm doing is literally getting those seeds to crack in the cell trays. And as soon as they pop their heads up, very carefully, I take those plugs out and I put them out in the garden because it is a little too hot right now for them to germinate well outside. So let's see, Michelle, I call it quits this week on two Chicola broccoli that I'd hoped to nurse through summer in a somewhat protected, slightly shaded area. Has worked in the past, but not this time. You know, when you're really pushing the envelope on stuff, Michelle, it is, you know, from year to year. And even on stuff you're not pushing the envelope on. Even stuff that you're growing right in the season that it's supposed to be growing in, you know, you can't expect consistency from year to year. One of the things I always do to try and mitigate that is I will plant multiple varieties of the same thing from that season, or maybe from a slightly behind season. So in other words, like if it's February or March, I can get them to germinate, I'll put them on heat pads and put a dome over them. I might plant the Market More cucumbers and the Summer Dance cucumbers at the same time. And that way, no matter which way the weather goes, if it ends up being a colder spring, the Summer Dance will kind of tank and have mildew problems and not be happy. But the Market Mores will do great. If it gets hot really quick, the Market Mores will tank and the Summer Dance will do really great. I've also found, even if you're planting stuff right in the season, let's take the amaranth, for example. I've got the red amaranth, the white amaranth, and the green callaloo amaranth. And all three of those are literally made for the summer, but I'll have all three of them in at the same exact time. And I'll notice only caterpillar pressure on one or on two of them and not on the third one. So kind of hedging your bets and planting different kinds of stuff, whether you're in season or you're trying to stretch a season, I think is always going to, it's going to help you do better. So a lot of the stuff, spring stuff and fall stuff, we have two opportunities to grow that stuff. And what I found, it's like, you know, one spring I might do really, really well with my yellow squash. And then fall, I don't do really well with it. And I'm like, well, shucks. And then in the spring, I don't do well with it again. I'm like, well, damn. And then in the fall will be, you know, a great year. So just depending on, you know, disease pressure is cyclic. Insects are cyclic, not only through 1 year, but from year to year, just depending on our weather. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that factors involved, but, you know, weather, temperature. So if we're talking about the plants physically themselves, the cycles of the bugs, the cycles of the insects, the cycles of the fungus. Whether or not you remembered to wash your scissors and you cut this thing over here with them and it had something on it and you brought it over to your other plants, who knows? There's so many factors, but don't be surprised when one year something works and the next year it doesn't. The good news is whatever happened at the end that you were stretching it into, and hopefully you did pretty well with them in the beginning in the spring. So Michelle says, by plug trays, do you mean like you get strawberry slips in? So no, yes, but smaller than that. So the plug trays that I use, the plugs are about that big and about that deep. They're tiny. So what happens, because carrots put out a big taproot really fast, and so I tried using bigger, deeper plugs and letting them sit in there, but it actually wasn't big enough. And so with those bigger plugs, it's harder to get the plug out and the plant out without it falling apart on you when it's not at least a little bit root bound. So I use these smaller plugs and I pack the vermiculite and the peat moss mix really tight in there. So even without a plant growing in it, those plugs will still hold their shape pretty well if they're moist. And I put the seeds in. As soon as those seeds germinate, I'm popping those plugs out from the bottom very carefully and transplanting the carrots out into the garden. And I'll do that as early as mid-July for the new Corota carrots. And then Michael Thorne, what about germinating the carrots in something like a little Jiffy pot inside and then cutting off the bottom and planting outside? That might work, but you're talking about this big old thing for one carrot also. That would totally work, but if I remember correctly, the Jiffy pots aren't the cheapest thing in the world. And, you probably only get away with like one per Jiffy pot. And what are they, like this big around? I bought some, the smallest ones I could find. It really isn't that hard if you get the smaller plug trays. Trying to think if I have one too close. Is it raining outside? Yeah, I'm not going out there to get a plug tray to show you guys. But basically, the plug trays are the standard size is called 1020. That means 10 inches by 20 inches is a standard tray. It's called 1020 tray. And those can actually be the trays that hold like your pots. But the plug trays are called 1020 trays as well, 10 inches by 20 inches. And so the number on the tray, the higher the number, the smaller the cells, because that's the number of cells that you have in a 1020. So a 98 tray has got bigger cells than a 392 tray. So we have 98 trays, we have 128 trays, we have 200 trays, and we have 392. We have 298 trays and we have 392 trays. So I do my carrots in the 392s, which are really small. We do a lot of our herbs and flowers in those as well. But that was a good idea. I mean, the idea is just get that taproot down sooner than later. But I'm just thinking it's going to take up way too much space. So like, if one of those Jiffy things is what, like a 6-pack or a 9-pack, that's only 9 carrots. Because I guess you could try and put them in there and separate them if you're really careful. I know people who, when they're straight seeding their carrots in their garden and they sprinkle the seeds in, any that are too close, if you get them early enough, they can actually dig them up and separate them and transplant them. But you got to really know what you're doing for sure. So anybody else have any questions or comments? Or if you're watching this video at a later time, feel free to comment on the Facebook post. If you're sharing the video or if you shared the video before the video started, you got to share it again. So Facebook Live does this really weird thing where when you schedule a live video, that's actually one post. And then after I'm done, Facebook will actually post it again. So the one with the smeared picture on it is so that people could have tuned in live. The recorded version goes up onto Facebook as a separate post. So if all you did was share this into a group or onto your page for people to tune in live, when I'm done with this video, they're not going to be able to click on it to watch the video later. So you need to go back onto Whitwam Organics Facebook page and grab this other one when I'm done. Share that one into there as well so that people can watch the archive. So basically the live video and the archive are two separate Facebook posts, just FYI. So if you're watching the Facebook, if you're watching this on Facebook later on, or if you're watching on YouTube later, feel free to comment. I will monitor the comments on these videos. If you want me to get back to you sooner than later, you can send me a Facebook message. You can email us at info@whitwamorganics.com, which is also a, if you want me to cover a garden question while I'm doing these videos because you can't watch live and you're only watching these later, you can send the question or a topic that you want me to cover to info@whitwamorganics.com. Don't forget to check out our website, guys. We got lots of live plants on there. Our own blend of liquid fertilizers, great organic granular fertilizer. We have drip irrigation parts. We're a distributor for Dig drip irrigation, which is a great line of drip irrigation parts. Michael Thorne, really quick before I go, I'm going to answer y'all's questions. I got any secret to germinating Gaillardia? They escape me. I don't know. We do great. We just throw them in our seed trays and they germinate, man. I don't know. We germinate them year round. And then Kenny Gill. Hey, Kenny. I guess you tuned in a little late. You can go back and watch. How are you handling leaf-footed bugs and their nymphs on peppers and eggplants? I honestly have not seen them cause a problem on my peppers and my eggplants or on my long beans. They're on them, but I don't see the peck marks and the bruises like I do when they're hitting the tomatoes. You know, if you've got maybe a variety of pepper and a variety of eggplant that is being affected by it, try a different variety. What I have on my website, what we grow over the summer, I do not see damage. That's the California Wonder bell pepper, all the hot peppers that I have, the big red pepper, and then the five types of eggplants. I don't see damage on them when the leaf-footed bugs are out. In fact, that's one of the plants that I usually will switch out tomatoes and plant something else like that over the summer. Well, thanks everybody for joining me. Thank you for being a part of my my slideshow. Next week, cool. I forgot about this. So I forgot about this plug. So next week, I'm traveling to Brooksville to meet with my chemist buddy, and we are going to do live pH soil testing. We're going to have a couple different types of instruments. We're going to talk about calibrating the instruments. We're going to talk about collecting your soil. We're going to talk about the water you're adding, all the different ins and outs of actually being able to test your own pH. If you guys have any pH, the test strips that you work with that you prefer, please put it in the comments because I'm gonna probably order some online, and I want to make sure I'm getting test strips that people use. I don't test pH in my soil. I know my soil, the soil I sell, I know it like the back of my hand. I know my regimen that I mix in. I know I got this down. And if I had to test pH, I would send it off if it was some new garden site that we weren't adding our own soil. But I know pH is really important to some people. We'll talk about pH and its importance, but I'm also going to bring some of my soil that I'm going to pull out from some garden beds where things are. Thank you, Kenny. Garden Tutor test strips. So I just want to make sure that I get my hands on the brands of test strips that you guys are using, and we are going to test them with a chemist, and we're going to use test strips. Same soil samples. We're going to use test strips. We're going to use the big official $500 pH testers that you got to plug in, all the way down to those little hand tools that you can use. And I want to show you guys the differences in the measurements. We're going to talk about how temperature can affect it. We're going to talk about everything. So next week, It's all about pH, and we're going to do some live pH testing. And I'm really excited about that. I'm going to learn some stuff. I know it because I don't do a whole lot of pH testing, but I know a lot of you guys do. And I know a lot of you guys freak out when your pH is way off. So I really want to show you the discrepancies between these instruments. I don't think I have time, but I might even take these same soil samples and send them off to IFAS and see what their pH tests come back at. And we're going to see this. I know it. We're going to see this huge range of numbers, and nobody's really going to match up. And JB is going to talk to us about how, if you're doing your own home testing, how you can get that range down into a number that's more accurate, and what those different numbers. But you guys are going to see it's going to be all over the place. It's the testers, it's the method, it's the way the wind's blowing that second. There's so many factors that can throw the pH measurement off when you're doing it. So tune in next week. I hope you guys have a great week. Stay dry, stay hydrated, get out there, enjoy your gardens. Just whatever you do, make sure you get the right stuff planted. Throw those tomatoes away. All right, guys. See you next week.